I have been spending a lot of time thinking about and debating the whole Nintendo Switch thing. I made a video not too long ago talking about whether or not I thought it was too expensive or if it was actually makes a lot of sense for all you're getting. But something I've seen quite regularly and I've heard from especially a lot of my friends is that why should you even consider buying the Nintendo Switch 2 when you can get a Steam Deck for cheaper? Granted, this comes from the perspective of all my friends having gaming PCs, including massive Steam libraries, and also already owning either an original Nintendo Switch or some of one of the many variations out there. And from Nintendo also delaying pre-orders because of the tariffs, which thankfully have been paused for 90 days for some reason. I'm not too invested in it, but Nintendo still hasn't made any moves to make the pre-orders available in the US or Canada, at least at the time of recording. But those tariffs could cause the Switch 2 to be even more expensive or functionally stay exactly the same. Apparently Nintendo priced the Switch according to the potential of tariffs, but if that was true, I don't think they would have delayed pre-orders in the first place. Because if that was the case, like I've seen so many outlets online discuss, why would they have delayed it in the first place if they had planned for tariffs as a potential thing that could happen? The Steam Deck makes an interesting case for itself. Still, even with Switch 2 and many other better PC handhelds coming out since, and even official SteamOS support for handhelds like the Legion Go has finally arrived. So it does genuinely beg the question, should you pre-order the Switch 2 or just buy a Steam Deck? The Steam Deck, though it's starting to show its age, still has some pretty compelling reasons why you should buy it. If you have a massive Steam library, it is the perfect way to transition your desktop setup portably. Very similar argument the Switch makes for itself, being able to play at home and then take it with you on the go seamlessly. Assuming you turn on your Steam Deck or your Steam Deck was just in sleep mode, it should auto-sync all your saves, so you'll never have to think about it, and you, on top of that, don't need to pay NSO for some games to have cloud saves in the first place. So you could have functionally a Switch-like experience if you have a gaming PC or laptop at home and a Steam Deck for when you're on the go, or need something more portable than a laptop. If you get the OLED, you're getting a really nice, amazing OLED screen with 90Hz refresh rate, granted not as high as the Switch 2's 120Hz, but I personally think the 90Hz OLED split with having also on top of that amazing HDR is a fair bit better of a compromise than being IPS 120Hz with HDR-like display and brightness. Granted, we haven't seen the display in person yet, so we can't say whether or not it is a better or worse screen. What I'm mostly saying is it's two different, very similar solutions. Some people might prefer having a higher refresh rate and take the disadvantages with IPS. Some would prefer having OLED if it had the caveat of having a slightly lower refresh rate. For me personally, I would take the lower refresh rate OLED because OLED is just fantastic, and once you get used to that, it is kinda hard to switch to a device that doesn't have OLED. I remember the first time I went from a Nintendo Switch OLED back to an original Switch, and golly, it was a huge difference. From brightness to contrast, it was just insane the difference was. And for a lot of people, that could be a massive deciding factor, whether or not you buy a handheld or pick a different device entirely. I know some people who waited for the Zotac Zone because that was an OLED screened device for a PC handheld, because a lot of the PC handheld options didn't have OLED at the time. Granted, there were more options in between the reveal and the release of the Zotac Zone, because that thing was like first unveiled 8 months to a year before it ever came out, to my knowledge. Bear in mind, I didn't really take a look that deeply into the Zotac Zone, so I could be wrong, but I just remember there being a huge gap in other OLED options coming out in the space between. The Steam Deck has its own problems though, doesn't play every single game found on Steam, and it is starting to show its age, and so the Switch 2 should be, at least on paper, significantly more powerful. And thanks to being a home console, it generally should have better support and have greater degrees of optimization. So on top of just being more performant, it is also received an immense amount of optimization from developers. Elden Ring looks like it's running at a solid 1080p, at least in dock mode, 60 FPS, where the Steam Deck struggles to do native resolution with medium to low-ish settings to achieve 40-ish FPS, which, bear in mind, isn't terrible, but it won't be nearly as optimized as what the Switch 2 is getting. Also, this next part is a bit more subjective. The exclusives that Nintendo has really do sell the system on its own. A lot of people don't even care whether or not it has X or Y game. It just want it to have whatever Nintendo is selling. They want to play the Donkey Kong game, they want to play the new Pokemon, and the only way you can do that, at least until a Switch 2 emulator happens, which is inevitable, but until something like that happens, the only way to play those games is on Switch 2, while any game on Steam can be played on any possible device, except Nintendo games, obviously. So for some people, they've already made up their minds. They have the first Switch, they're gonna get the Switch 2, because it's all they really want is to play Nintendo games, which is perfectly reasonable. But for people who are on the fence, I am of the opinion, and some people in my comments have actually said that they've done this already, picking up a Switch OLED or an original Switch on layaway, on clearance, or even just on a general sale as a sort of a stopgap solution until either the Switch 2 gets cheaper or until they can find one at a significantly reduced price. Or they're just keeping the Switch they already have and getting something like a Steam Deck until such time where the Switch 2 is generally available without concerns of lack of stock or anything like that, and probably at a significantly better price, which could take upwards of a year or probably more. So it's more of a long-term plan, but for some people that actually makes a lot of sense. For me personally, I will inevitably have to get one purely because I make videos about this stuff, and if I don't, I'll just be left in the dust. But I am going to wait longer than most who intend on getting one. Because if I wasn't making videos about this, I would have probably a year to get my hands on this. Because at $450 for the base model, that is just a little rich for my blood, especially considering what I play usually on these kinds of handhelds. Specifically, the Switch used to be my all primary, that is my exclusive portable device, but since then, it has been supplanted by handhelds like the Steam Deck, and the Switch 2 will mostly play an auxiliary role in my day-to-day gaming life. It's pretty much going to be exclusively played on for those Nintendo exclusives, which, of those exclusives, I don't play a huge amount of them. I used to care a lot about Pokemon until Game Freak decided to frankly stop caring about making good games. Never been a huge Zelda guy. Kirby was always just kind of a fun side thing, but I ain't paying $70 for Kirby. My top 3 most played games by playtime on my Switch was Stardew Valley, Minecraft, and Smash Brothers. Bear in mind, 2 of those games aren't even Nintendo games. And the only other Nintendo first-party game in the top 10 of my most played games was a Mario Kart, a party game. I mostly play my Switch, at least when it comes to new releases, is Mario. I've always been more of a Mario guy. I love my platformers, especially my 3D platformers. I love the 3D All-Stars collection, and I just really want to play those, and that's all I really played. So I don't feel like I necessarily need to jump on the whole Switch 2 bandwagon as soon as some other people. And as it currently stands, if you're in a very similar position, the Steam Deck, to me at least, makes a lot more sense for you to just go ahead and buy that now or some other Steam Deck equivalent. Because with the potential of the Switch 2 becoming even more expensive, to me, that's just a hard pill to swallow, especially given what we know about the launch lineup. Nothing really stands out that you can't already play on some other handheld device. Granted though, the Switch will probably provide a better overall performance experience. For me personally, I have ADHD, I have terrible time waiting for things, and I just would have, at this point, if I didn't have this whole YouTube thing to think about, would have just gone ahead and bought something like the Steam Deck, which I already have had done. I would love to hear what you guys think about this. Are you considering buying the Switch 2? Have you already saved up for your pre-order, or has this video made you really consider other options? I would love to hear what you guys think about that down below. Definitely leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media coverage down below. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.